So if you've been following my channel for any length of time, you'll know that I have been working on a Dark Souls mod, and it's done. It's out. I don't think I'm done with the mod. There are other things that I want to work on that I want to potentially add. Like right now, I'm actually working on adding a bleed pine resin. So instead of like a rotten pine resin, it causes bleed instead of poison, right? And that's actually functional right now. But the problem with that is more so that I'm trying to get it to look good, which is very difficult. Anyway, all of the basic stuff that I wanted to add, all of the weapon rebalancing, the infusion rebalancing, all of the weapon buff rebalancing, all of that is implemented properly. All of the upgrade materials and new drops and item locations, stuff to encourage using multiple weapons with multiple different infusions. That is all in the game now. So everything that I wanted to add to make it like the initial vision of my mod is done. It could have been done a long time ago. I just kind of got overwhelmed and had to take a break from development for a little bit. But if you're interested, you can click the link in the description. I'm gonna show off a little bit of what is going on in this mod. I'm gonna try not to show off too much because I think discovering a lot of what this has to offer is part of the fun. I do think that one playthrough will not be enough to show you everything in the mod, not even close. And the idea of the mod isn't even really to give a, first playthrough experience again. The idea is a lot more, the idea initially was a lot more to do with repeat playthroughs, where, in Dark Souls you would grab a weapon and then you would use it. And that was kind of it. You would always stick to standard, infusions or whatever, because pretty much any elemental infusion was just going to do worse damage the vast majority of the time. A lot of weapons like the Astara Straight Sword or the Moonlight Greatsword are just kind of worse for the builds that they're intended to be used by, because you can't like use weapon buffs with them or whatever. I don't have music on. I forgot about that. that just means I can add music in post, I guess. Anyway, yeah, so the idea is that now, you're incentivized to not only use multiple different weapons, but also use infusions, which is facilitated by a ton of upgrade materials, the pre-infused weapons that are scattered about the game. I mean, really what I did is I brought it more in line with Dark Souls 2. That makes me want to add power stancing so badly, but I have no idea how I would even start to go about doing that. As much as I would love to add power stancing and make this Dark Souls 2 in Dark Souls 1, I just don't think I'm capable of that. But in the meantime, Dark Souls 2 has a lot of pre-placed weapons that encourage using and experimenting with different infusions. You have something like the Craftsman's Hammer that's placed directly before the Ruin Sentinels that also has a Twinkling Titanite with it. So you get this weapon in upgrade material specifically for the weapon in an area with a bunch of that upgrade material anyway, assuming you're playing the superior version of the game, of course. And that is used immediately. If you decide to experiment with that weapon, you can use that to immediately make a boss fight way easier, right? Or if you're struggling with a boss fight, you might try a different weapon and see, oh wait, I can upgrade this, let me try it out. And so you learn, even if not perfectly, you get the idea of damage types in your head, with strike, which is a lot more important in Dark Souls 2 as opposed to Dark Souls 1, where honestly physical damage types aren't all that important the vast majority of the time. Like strike is the best one, but it's really not by much, right? And in this, I tried to make that a lot more obvious, especially with elements. Like, for instance, I put a divine weapon in the catacombs, right? I did put a magic weapon in the garden because it felt more thematic to put a magic weapon in the garden as opposed to somewhere where magic would be particularly useful, like in Anor Londo or whatever. But I don't know. I think that kind of works with how I wanted the progression to be and how I wanted to encourage using different weapon types. Oh my god, playing on keyboard feels so wrong. I swear that's why I'm playing bad. It has nothing to do with me being bad at the video game. And I mean, if you haven't seen my other mod showcase videos, which admittedly I don't blame you, they were kind of all over the place and very poorly formatted, but I do have a new ring on called the Ring of the Goddess of the Sun that effectively acts as Lloyd's sword ring. It's also really powerful. I don't want to rebalance it though, because the thing that makes it particularly powerful isn't actually accessible immediately. You have to get through a good chunk of the game to even use it. I made gold pine resin infinitely accessible, significantly easier. Like Domhnall sells it infinitely now, for instance. So a lot of things that you might not particularly engage with in the base game are things that I wanted to highlight. Like in vanilla, base split damage is awful, right? It just is worse than not using split damage. But here, I buffed scaling. Like I gave all infusions except for, I believe, raw and chaos scaling. So now fire scales off of faith and intelligence, just like in Dark Souls 2, and also Dark Souls 3. There's also, oops, oh my god, I'm getting comboed. I also placed pine resins more around. I made infused weapons buffable, so now you can, you know, use lightning weapon on a lightning weapon. You can use, for instance, I think a big one is using magic weapon, or, you know, crystal magic weapon or whatever on Moonlight Greatsword, which makes Moonlight Greatsword so much better for a spell build, right? Or a spell sword build, which is kind of what it feels like it's supposed to be for anyway, but it just kind of doesn't work for that because you can't buff it. Or say Restore a Straight Sword, you can use it with a faith build and actually use lightning weapon on it. On top of the fact that I just buffed Restore a Straight Sword because it didn't do very much damage anyway. Which, honestly, Restore a Straight Sword does feel kind of like an early game weapon for repeat playthroughs, but exclusively early game. Also, new ring placement, the green Tearstone ring, which is similar to the blue Tearstone ring in its usage, but functions slightly differently, which I'm not going to go too into. You'll have to figure it out yourself. Yeah, the point is, I made a lot of features that you probably wouldn't engage with in the base game a lot more accessible, a lot more usable, and a lot more worth using. So infusions are just objectively a lot better now. Weapon buffs can be used in a lot more builds, and the builds that are actually can use weapon buffs are more encouraged to use them. Or, you know, if you're used to using weapon buff builds like I am, it'll encourage you to use them on more weapons, or even like mix in some spells to your weapon buff builds. Again, the point of this wasn't to make it like a unique first playthrough experience, but I do think, as much as I wasn't going for that, it does hopefully, you know, give you that sense of exploration and whatever that you get from a first playthrough of a Souls game. A couple of people who've played the mod already said that it does give them that sense of exploration and wanting to like explore things and whatever all over again, which is great. I love that happened, as much as it wasn't necessarily intentional, right? It also might encourage you to, you know, go through the game with different routing to get different infusions at different times. It'll make you hopefully actually talk to Rickert, but you know, that remains to be seen. Anyway, the Firekeeper souls have been moved. There are new rings. A lot of old rings have different effects. Like, I don't say this anywhere in the mod, but the Old Witch's ring actually buffs fire damage. It doesn't buff pyromancies, primarily because I couldn't figure out how to get it to buff pyromancies, but it does buff weapon fire damage, which I think is an interesting, you know, use for the ring that didn't have one otherwise. The Covenant of Artorias and the Orange Charred Ring, their vanilla effects are always active once you get the ring. Like, if the ring is in your inventory, it's giving you the effect, but when you wear it, it gives you a different effect. I actually don't remember if I got the Covenant of Artorias one to work properly. I don't think I did, so I'll have to fix that. But the Orange Shard Ring does have an effect when you wear it that isn't just letting you walk through lava. I believe I placed more... I increased drop chances from basically all upgrade materials and added a lot of upgrade material drop chances. So for instance, basilisks and crag spiders in Blighttown and the basilisks in the depths can now drop green titanite shards, which they couldn't do in vanilla, which I feel like it makes sense for them to do that, and that's kind of the point in the game where you're going to be wanting to use infusions, or starting to want to experiment with infusions, right? There's just a lot more titanite scattered around. I believe I guarantee a drop, or a chunk drop, from crystal lizards. I don't remember exactly what I changed with the crystal lizards. A titanite shard is guaranteed to drop from the fang boar and the parish. That's another example. Oops. I just wanted to kind of show off some of the changes that I made. There's a lot of there's a lot of little changes that I think all add up to something pretty major. A couple boss fights have also been changed pretty dramatically. The one change that I always wanted to see in a Dark Souls mod that I hadn't come across and wanted to do myself was in the Sanctuary Guardian fight. The water is actually, it makes you slow, right? So instead of being able to walk through the water freely, you either have to wear the Rusted Iron Ring or, you know, deal with the slower walking speed and whatever. And I think that's a really interesting thing that makes the fight harder while not being artificial difficulty. On top of just buffing the Sanctuary Guardian's health because it deserved that. That's probably the most major change to a boss fight. I'm trying to think of other ones that I might have done. The second Gargoyle comes in with full health because you're probably going to be dealing a lot more damage because of, you know, the Fire Longsword. There's also gold pine resin in the Gargoyle arena. And I would consider that a fairly small change because, like, it doesn't, you know, fundamentally change how you fight the boss, but it does change, you know, how you engage with which Gargoyle you're fighting at what time or whatever. It does make the fight a little bit more tense. So yeah, if you're interested in trying out the mod, seeing what changes I made, there's a link in the description. There is a list of every single change that I remembered that I put in a link to a document on the Nexus page, but chances are I probably missed some changes in there, but all like most of them are on that list if you want to see that. But I do heavily encourage going through it without looking at that list, playing the mod at least once without looking at that list. Because I think that's a more fun experience personally, but the list is there if you want it. And it also has a more succinct overview of the mod on the Nexus page, obviously. Effectively, TLDR, this is a huge rebalance mod that completely changes, or the goal is to completely change what parts of the game you do and don't engage with. Like the ring system, a lot of people just put on Havel's Ring and Favor and Protection, and that's it, right? While for this mod, I wanted to encourage using a lot more rings. So a lot more useful rings are a lot more accessible early on. The Silver Serpent Ring and the Gold Serpent Ring are both much more easily accessible, much earlier. The Rusted Iron Ring is also much easier to access, and also a lot more useful on a spot. Maybe not the one you're thinking of, but it is in a much more useful spot. Use rings, use infusions if you haven't before. I think this is a good way to kind of encourage yourself to do that. Hopefully the changes are enjoyed. A lot more upgrade materials. There's a lot less farming, a lot less apprehension about using specific weapons. Hopefully a lot more exploration because of moved item placements. Even though, you know, not everything is moved. A lot of things are in the same spot that they would be in vanilla, but there are a lot of new added items. There are a lot of moved items. There are a couple of weapons that I think you'll find pretty early on that will end up carrying you through a lot more of a playthrough than you might have expected. I'm replacing the Fire Short Sword with a Fire Long Sword. I am in the process of doing that. Like, I have Smithbox open in the background and I'm ready to press the button to make that happen. Just as a kind of homage to Dark Souls 2, because I figured that was pretty fitting for all the changes that I was making. Anyway, if you have any questions about the mod, or if you have any feedback that you would like to give, there's the comment section of this video. I also have a Discord link in the description for that. Or, you know, there's the Nexus page or whatever. But thank you all so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. I love you all. And I would especially like to thank Dewey Adams, Nocia, Manu, Astral Lily, Waylag, Winter, Validate, Nick Possum, Krista, Owling Nocturne, Ryasune21, Racuna, Anthony, Manarok, and Ryan Rickard. Thank you all so much for supporting the channel. I don't know how to end this.